Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 23. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest is, I like starting these conversations making fun of close friends. So this guest is on the show because of a good friend of ours, Ryan Turbide. I've said this before in an earlier episode, he just throws all his buddies in front of me instead of him. So anyways, Turbide, this one's for you. So I'll let this guest introduce himself, his name, and what he's up to.
Hey, my name is Mike Pigot. I'm a chef here in the city and collaborator and entrepreneur. I've been working on lots of different fun projects over the last couple of years, and I've been in the city for almost 14. So
It's been 14 years.
Yeah.
Where was your first, sorry, I'm going to take this offside right away, but where was your first restaurant gig in the city?
I actually moved to the city for school initially, but I was working for Milestones of all places, and I worked for them downtown on Stephen Ave. I was a sous chef for a little bit, and then I was actually a chef when I went to school as well for that company. So kind of full circle.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I didn't catch your name until probably when you were at Home and Away.
Yeah.
That was kind of the first time that I kind of caught wind of you. So that would have been, I don't know, how long was that? 8 years?
Yeah. 2015, we opened Home and Away for the first time. Yeah.
And was that was that the first big, I don't want to say big, but was that the first thing that where you're part of the team?
Actually, I had a little bit of a different background. So I did the corporate restaurant scene and big groups for a bit. So I was with Kara and Milestones when I first moved to the city. Then I actually went and worked for Moxie's at their head office with Northlands and all them.
Oh, no way.
And did that for a couple of years up in Barlow and McKnight.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
So do you know the name Al Hazard? He was worked at the head office. He might have been before you actually, but he was their one of their head purchasing guys.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
Worked with Lords and all those guys.
Yeah, Lords was there when I was there. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. But yeah. That's why I did that for a couple of years, and then ended up going in and actually working for Marietta's and worked for CA Restaurants, that whole group, and I was their corporate field chef for almost 3 years. So I traveled between their locations in Edmonton, Canmore, and all the ones in the city when they had them here as well. So
cool.
Did that, and then from there went to Home and Away.
It's like a deep background.
Yeah.
So you've seen a couple of these shows, and what I like to do is let the guests go back as far as they want to go. And this will be really interesting for me because you and I, we barely know each other, which is awesome. But I'd love for you just to go back and just kind of where you grew up, how you grew up, inspiration from family, friends, whether it's sports, whether it was always culinary, music. I want you to go back to a moment in time where you're kind of comfortable with this is kind of, I remember I started becoming something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I grew up I was born in Nelson, so I'll go all the way back. Born in the Kootenays. My parents worked up there for a number of years, and then ended up moving when I was pretty young to Abbotsford in the Lower Mainland in BC, and did my whole growing up there. Went to high school there, elementary school.
Yep.
And really for me, kind of always was really fascinated with art and photography, and really in that kind of realm. It was painting, drawing my whole life, and that was really the number one passion. If you asked me from the age of 5 until 18, 19, I was I'm going to be an artist. That's the plan.
Anything.
Yeah.
Were you thinking graphic designer? Or were you thinking traditional painting?
Traditional film photography. Did a lot of film photography. I actually got a scholarship for that when I graduated high school. But painting and drawing was always kind of a passion of mine as well. And definitely where everything started and the roots of all that. And my mom's dad was really creative as well. He was worked in the grocery business, so food full circle with that as well. He was one of the top guys at Overweighty for a long time, and my whole kind of mom's side of the family works with that group or worked with that group. And so always had this hand in food, but always also very creative as well.
And did you know that? Sorry, did you know that early? Growing up, was it just you had this creative bone in you? You're always doodling, you're always messing around, or how did you?
Oh, 100%. I go to my parents' house, they have boxes and boxes of sketchbooks. They literally kept everything.
Have you seen any lately?
Yeah. I've looked at them, and there's a full closet full of art stuff from when I was a kid. But definitely that was the number one passion. And then when I was about 16, I started working in restaurants. I had a friend of mine. He was leaving to go live in Iceland at the time, and he's like, "Hey, I'm leaving. I have this job downtown in Abbotsford, so not really a downtown, small town, but a little fine dining restaurant there. I was a CCC chef, so certified chef de cuisine. At the time, I had no idea what that designation means, but very educated in the culinary world. And he owned a little fine dining restaurant there, and I ended up working for them as a doorman. So I'm 16 years old. I'm wearing wearing a suit, white gloves, opening doors for people, taking people's coats.
No way.
And that's really my first introduction into the restaurant world.
Was that your first job?
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a fluke, just random? He just like asked you in passing, you're like, this sounds half interesting.
100% random. I used to ride bikes like a lot growing up. So I like
BMX?
like mountain bikes.
Okay.
So I raced downhill, did some freestyle, all that sort of thing.
No way.
I went that direction. And then I hurt myself pretty bad. And so I kind of stopped in that world when I was in my late teens. But we rode bikes together. So he was like, hey, I'm going to go overseas. Do you want to do this? And so I was like, yeah, let's try it out. So I went and interviewed and they hired me right away. And they're like, you just need to go get a suit. So I was like, okay. So go suit shopping with my dad when I'm 16 years old to get this job for the first time. But
like a shitty suit? Or do you think do you have a picture of it?
I think I have a picture of it somewhere. It looks pretty good. It was like the boxy, like big shoulder, like aesthetic for very, very old school. But yeah, that was my first job doing that. So pretty funny.
What about the biking piece is interesting for me. How was this like, if you're growing up, the first thing you said, it was like, 5 to 16, you were art creative.
Yeah.
The biking thing was in there somewhat, or was it?
I was pretty heavy in sports in general. So I played hockey from the time I was like 5 years old until the time I was 14, 15. Yep. Had a little brief stint playing some football in my high school days as well. But I rode bikes basically from the time I was, say like 10 or 11, I got like my first mountain bike.
Yep.
My parents took me to Whistler, and saw this like whole world of like where kind of the birthplace of mountain biking existed. And so just got super into that. And I would spend hours and hours on my bike. Like I would be either like, I'd go to school, get off school, go ride bikes with my friends till it's dark out, come home, do my homework, do some art. And that was like the routine, like my whole entire high school was doing that. So yeah, pretty fascinating. But I raced in like the BC Cup quite a bit when doing those.
No way.
Did some like kind of the birthplace of like freestyle and kind of seeing that sort of stuff in perspective in mountain biking too. And so started doing that, riding like street and park and going in that world too. Way. But yeah, it was super fun. And like,
you're like way into it.
Like made tons of friends, had like a bike team, were sponsored by a bunch of people. And yeah, super cool kind of time in my early teens and late teens.
And did the accident kind of put everything on, stop everything or slow it down?
Slowed it down. I broke my kneecap and I was like, yeah, this is like just the brutal recovery and takes so long. I did that when I was 17. And I'm like, this is just like 6 months off, like this whole thing, and never really fully like had the like no fear mentality after that. I was like, oh, this is real. And like, if you like are working or have a job or doing that, like this is definitely a different place to be. So for that, definitely slowed it down. And then I ended up getting back into biking when I was in my early 20s and got a mountain bike again when I lived out here in Calgary. And so it's always kind of, I've always gone back and forth to it, like kind of my whole life, but definitely a passion of mine for sure.
And now do you still ride a bit?
A little bit, not as often.
Because you're busy as shit.
Yeah. Also scared to hurt. I don't want to get hurt.
You got like bills, you got jobs.
Yeah. Can't afford to do that right now.
Do you find it tough like to do it half-assed? Like, can you be a tourist on a mountain bike, or do you just like have to go as hard as you can go? Yeah,
I'm like 90-10. Like I want to go for it, but I'm also like that risk is very real. So, but no, I definitely enjoy doing it. I just rent bikes now if I'm going to go out. And
that's a good idea.
It's much less often than it was before. So that's the way to go for sure.
Cool. Yeah. So back to 16, you're working the door.
Yeah, working the door.
So what are you thinking? You're like bright-eyed and just like,
I had no idea. Like I'm like going to the kitchen and like it's like very intense and like I'm like, why do you call this guy chef? Like he has a name. Like I just don't. I had zero.
Did you go to school?
Like zero idea of like what it was, and like even his wife introduced him as chef. Like this is like chef and da da da. So, but really just like a very cool introduction into it and a very like high level of what they were kind of doing at the time. And really there's only 2 fine dining restaurants in Abbotsford. So I was there and another restaurant that actually still exists, Restaurant 62, which is still in the town there. And it's kind of seen a lot of different evolutions, but I ended up working for him kind of off and on for close to 4 years, and that was kind of the beginning of my like career in the industry.
Doing what? What were you doing?
I was a doorman, and then I went into kind of doing some more like the catering side with them and helping that. So I did some serving, did some like prep, and then it kind of just like snowballed from there. I went and worked for Earl's for a little bit, came back and worked for him again. Went and worked on the island for a bit, came back and worked for him again. So
always back of house.
Yeah, so always back of house after that. But it was like the first year was kind of more the front of house thing and some serving and catering pieces, and then all back of house after that. So really good learning experience. Like I look back at it now and I'm like, pretty grateful for that. And like, he was definitely very hard on it, but had a very like high level of expectation for people and treated me really well. And so, yeah, definitely a very cool experience.
Did you know right away that the back of house experience kind of fit with your personality?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I thought it was just a cool job when I was like doing it. I was like, I went to work at Earl's because all my friends worked there. So I was like, hey, let's go do this job. And it was like a good time. We had lots of drinks and kind of had the first experience what the industry looks like. And I really enjoyed it. Like it was a great camaraderie, and I still talk to like so many people from that time. And interesting to see like their careers, whether they've like skyrocketed to like the top at Earl's or they've gone and done something else now in like the hospitality field. But really like the industry just is so connected, and you meet so many different people in so many different fields, and whether they're going to school to be like a doctor or they're just doing this because they want to do this forever. It's pretty fascinating.
Do you, when you've, because I worked in the restaurant biz for a long time, and I was in a lot of restaurants, like, the same ones that you worked in, just you see the front house and you see the back house. Yeah. And there's a different energy, there's a different style of person in each one. Did you know that the back fit you, or because the front house is different, just it's a different energy out there. Yeah. The back is like, I don't know. I've never been in the back, so I can't really like fully explain it because I've been talking on my ass. Yeah. Did you know right away that the back fit you, who you are and what you're interested in?
I think I've always been like fascinated in both. So like I think the back was one that I like the creative side of cooking and creating stuff and doing that. Yep. But for me, like all my like really great friends are all front of house people, like for the most part. Like a few chefs that are great friends of mine, but like for the most part, it's like the front of house, like ownership, hospitality leaders, those sort of things that I've like always kind of gravitated towards. Yep. Most of them do have like a culinary background in some extent, or whether it was like a brief period of time or they've done their Red Seal or they've gone to school for it. Yep. But like, I think for me, it's always like, what's the big picture? And so like, I found like more like back house, you're like kind of not pigeonholed, but you're like very much like just focused on like, this is the craft, this is what we're doing. We're putting out plates. Whereas I think like the front house wise, like people are like more gravitate towards like seeing both of like, hey, this is like how we create a restaurant, how we create a room and an atmosphere. Cause like food is 90% of the experience, but if that 10% lacks, then it's not going to ever add up. And so I've always kind of been fascinated in that scope. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense when you think about the, it's not, well, I guess in today's world, a lot of restaurants are chef driven, right? Yeah. So they're in the backs, but they have these faces out front that kind of, that 10% that keep it all going the right direction. Totally. Which is an interesting balance. Yeah. If you had the perfect idea, if you had owned like your restaurant, if you could put up a bricks and mortar restaurant right now, and you could split your time between the back and the front, what do you think? What would you?
I think it's just natural now, like especially seeing chef driven places. Like I think it is gravitated more of like this industry is like this 50-50 collaborative, like really unique and like a better place to be where people really get on. But for me, like I think you just have to partner with the right person that fits your personality, so you can balance that out with like the front and the back. And then having a chef that also can go on the floor and speak is a big piece, I think, because people want that experience now. Like that's like the like VIP treatment of like the chef comes out and drops off a plate, and you see that at like so many restaurants in the city. It's just like that's the natural progression of where people have kind of landed.
Are you comfortable in that?
Super comfortable.
And make like it's just it lets you blend kind of both things that you enjoy.
Yeah. And I think it's like it's hospitality at the end of the day. You're inviting people into your place of business or your home and introducing them to something that you're doing and passionate about. And I think that just gravitates, and that energy is naturally connected with everyone. Yep. Yeah.
Do you the creativity around the like crafting a menu, or just like, being creative with how you put plates together? Yeah. Did you see that connection right away with having a creative background and then the food side, how you could be creative?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been like, that's been very like focused for me. So it's like my like number one pet peeve of like something's not exactly how it should look, or like doing stuff on big scales and developing stuff for bigger groups and bigger companies, and you see it and it's not the exact same every time, or it's like slight little tweaks. So you're like, oh, it could be so much better if you just like went on a 45-degree angle instead of this, or like use this color sauce instead of this. And like, how do you get that to like balance everything out? Yep. But I think like creativity and like deliciousness doesn't really go hand in hand. It's something you have to actually work for and like get to that place that it's like, this is where it looks and this is the aesthetic of it. But like you look at like an art background, it's like rule of thirds, like contrast, like all these pieces. And I think now more chefs are in that driven place, but I think for a long time it wasn't really seen as a parallel of like this really artistic form, whereas I think there's a whole other level of appreciation for that now.
Yeah, it's definitely way more topical. Like, me just being, like I said, I don't know much about the back, but you see the TV shows and, you watch the characters on TV and they're always talking about how it's plated and, the colors and all that.
Absolutely.
Stuff. So it's a big piece of the...
Huge piece.
So you go through Earl's, you touched on Care, which is interesting because I worked for Care too. Yeah. And the tail end of my restaurant career, Kara bought us. So that's very interesting. The Moxie's thing is very interesting. So walk me through your kind of progression on the corporate side before we start going into the entrepreneurial side of what you're up to. So, just doing your thing, you were working there because you were seeing successes. You were climbing the ladder, going from like whatever to KM to whatever. Yeah. And you were just doing it because you enjoyed it. It seemed right at the time.
I saw lots of growth with it, and I think for me I was in art school. I went to ACAD here.
You did?
Yeah, so that's why I came to Calgary initially, was to go to ACAD.
And when'd you graduate?
I didn't end up finishing my degree.
And you taking like the traditional, like the pottery stuff and the photography and that stuff?
So I did my first year of education in Abbotsford at like University of the Fraser Valley. Yep. And then I transferred out here and went into my like second and third year at ACAD. Yep. And I actually did like a drawing major. So I thought I was going to go for photo. That was the plan. And then drawing, I was like, oh, you can kind of do whatever you want. Like it's just like super creative and interesting, and met some like lifelong friends and amazing professors there. And like, I think going to that like school was just a great creative thinking lesson for me. And I like credit that for so much success I've had in my like adult life afterwards. Yep. But at the same time too, I was working as a chef the whole time, and I did see that success of like moving up the ladder and going that growth. And I went and worked for Kara initially at like Milestones in Langley, and then they transferred me out here when I was like, hey, I'm going to school. Can I work for you guys still and go out here? And it was a really great organization. It was very like family driven when I worked for them, and like people that had been there for decades at the time, and it was awesome to see that, especially being a Milestones being a Vancouver company originally.
Yep. Was when you were down at Stephen Ave, that's the one you were?
Yeah.
And was it new when you got there, or was it?
No, I think when I got to Stephen Ave, I think it was about 6 years old or 7 years old.
Did you pop in and start, were you the KM, or where did you come in?
No, so I came in just being like, oh, I'm just gonna come cook. Like I was like, I'm going to school. Yep. I don't want any like expectation of like leadership or anything like that. But I was kind of in like a junior sous role before I moved out there, and then just quickly moved back into that like almost right away. And then our chef there actually was having a baby, had some complications in his pregnancy. And I was like, he's like, hey, can you just step up and like help with this? And I was like, sure, sounds good. And so for me, I would literally work full time, and I'd go to school full time. I did 5 courses and I worked full time. So I'd go in on like a Monday, count inventory, go through the motions with like the chef there, get everything going, leave, go to school for like my like class in the morning, have my lunch break, sometimes come and work lunch during my lunch break for like the 2 hours we had between blocks, then come back and do it again. And then I'd go work at night. So like for me, it was like always just like very hustle driven and like being like crazy in that like always busy mentality.
And ACAD is a serious school. Yeah. Like the amount of work I didn't, all the super talented designers that I know came out of ACAD. Yeah. And when you listen to their stories about how in depth it was, and just, on the theory side and then the practical side, like it was insane the amount of work that had to be done there.
100%.
And you'd had that plus a full-time job.
Yeah.
So madness.
Madness. So I started ACAD though when I was 20. So like I had a little bit more like life experience before I went to school, I guess, or not much, but like 2 years of like just kind of doing my thing and traveling around a little bit and working some different places. And so when I went there, it was a little bit more easy to have those conversations with like your prof of like, I have to work this much. Like I want to work this much. Like this is like the balance. And so it was just really like a respectful relationship with everyone that I met there. And we had lots of like in-depth conversations. And one of my profs at the time was, she's like, art's the degree you always work for. Like it's the one that you're always going to like have to go back and hustle, and you might don't know when your next paycheck's coming, and like teaching is like the safe realm. And she's like, hospitality, you have a little bit more freedom. Her friend was a chef, I think, at the Royal York in Toronto. Okay. And so she was like, hey, like this is kind of the progression that they've gone on. And for me, when I ended up getting a job offer actually with Moxie's to go work at their head office. And I was like, well, do I want to go to school or do I want to do this? And so I went there and I went and worked at their head office location. Didn't go back for my 4th year at ACAD. And that's kind of where it all this hit off from there. And going to the head office was kind of a really unique experience for being like, hey, I get to see like the food development, like how does like the actual wheels turn on like a big organization. I think at the time they had like 56 locations. So they're like doing menu development like 2 years out and being able to be a part of that and like help out the corporate chefs at the time and going through that whole progression being there. And then I quickly moved into like the chef role at the head office location. Did that for a year and a bit. And then I ended up going on to work with like Marietta's after that. So really good kind of unique experience being in that corporate world, and something that I like credit most of my success for it, because it's like, hey, like you learn how to manage people, you learn how to like manage numbers, like you see how the wheels turn and how someone is successful in operating. So when you go do your own thing or you work somewhere independent, like you have all this stuff in your tool belt that like most chefs don't have, or like you come to culinary school and you have a basic understanding of food costs, but you don't know how to actually like fix it. That's so if there's an error, like how do you fix it? So learning all that was massive, and it's benefited my whole career after that point.
How long were you at Moxie's for at the head office?
I was only there for about 18 months. Okay. So not a super long time.
Which it's very interesting. the way you said that is exactly the way I feel about my experience at Original Joe's.
Yeah.
You get to play in a space that is way above like what you could build on your own.
Yeah.
You get to deal with big numbers, big teams, training, the long play to like roll something out, and you get to learn it all on somebody else's dime. Yeah. And then when you decide to step out and do your own thing, you have, like you said, all these tools in the toolbox that you're ready to roll. And it's not when people don't know that's what actually happened behind the scenes, they say, "He's so lucky," like, how does he do that? But there's all these things that you learn that in a big organization, which is just, totally. It's super unique.
And I think it's like real life. You're like, this is why this happens. Like X equals this. Yeah. And I think seeing that, like I was terrible at math, like awful at math, like failed math in high school.
Yes.
Like sucked.
Join the club.
But then I'm like, I literally do math every single day for like my clients, for myself, for like my own businesses. Yep. And it's so ingrained in me of just like off the head, like this is how it works. Like percentage basis, this, like, and like just learning that. I learned that because of corporate restaurants. Like that's really the position. So I find it super fascinating from like a business perspective and learning that for sure.
Do you think it's weird that, that now you are like part-time accountant? Like, as you grow up, you're like, you're drawing, you're painting, you're like super creative. Yeah. And I'm the same. Like I was a very creative person growing up, and in my generation, there was no options. Like you went to high school and you became like, lawyer, doctor, engineer, blah, blah, blah. The creative thing just wasn't there. Yeah. And I failed all my math class, like all of it. But now, running a business, there's always numbers rolling around. Yeah. And all of a sudden we can do it. Yeah. So it's like we just have to be interested in, we need these to make our other idea go. Like, it's crazy that all of a sudden you can rattle everything off.
Well, you bring it back to just like even like going to school and you're like, why am I learning like algebra or this or that? And it's like teach someone real life experience. Like this is what it is. Like because if you're passionate about it, you're going to be great at it. Like that's really where it is, and you're going to work towards it, and you're going to get better at it if you need to, and that sort of thing. But 100%, you're a part-time accountant for sure.
It makes everything go. Like all these decisions you make are based off the numbers versus these people are just kind of gut intuition. I love, but still, there's got to be some numbers behind the scenes.
Totally, yeah.
The Marietta's group, I don't know anything about these guys. Obviously, I know Marietta's has been around forever, but what's they hired you, or are you getting to a point now where people are headhunting you, or are you applying for gigs?
So, like my time at Cara was great because I met so many individuals downtown. Because like you work on Stephen Ave, you go to like the Bear, you go to OJ's. Like those are the places you went when I first moved here, and you meet everyone that was in hospitality on Stephen Ave, from the theater group to like Santini's to everyone that was on that whole strip. And so just met so many friends through that point of like, oh, and like obviously like if someone's like, oh, that person's great at their job, or this is like personality of that, and so I started to know more people as I went out, and that was kind of the like turning point of like really getting to know people.
Was that a big thing? Being, Stephen Ave is a very interesting spot. Yeah. And did you guys have, it's a big part of the culture, right? Yeah. Whether it's your Sundays, you have industry night, wherever it was OJ, I can't remember where it was down there, but there was whether Unicorn or wherever it is, that was a big thing.
Totally.
Do you think it was just because you're working in these environments for so long, these people you're working beside are now your pretty good friends because you see them for 10 hours a day, and then you get off shift and you just start rolling around in big groups. Yeah. And that's just part of the culture, isn't it?
100%. Yeah.
But did you know that it was going to open up all these doors?
No idea. Like I honestly,
you're just partying.
I'm like, wow, what's going to happen? Like, I've always been like very focused on like my job. Like my dad always kind of ingrained to me, like, what's the next step? Like, where are you getting to? Like, what are you working towards? Like that when you go somewhere. And so for me, it's always like, for when I'm at a job, I'm like, what's next? Like, can I move up here? Can I do this? Like, what do I need to know to get to that next level? And I always kind of progressed that way. And so like, if someone was like, hey, like talk about an opportunity, but I've always kind of been like that dreamer, like, hey, like what else can I do? And so I met a lot of people and that had that same sort of thing, whether it was in their career or in art or something else that they wanted to do as well. Yep. And then you just gravitate towards those people. And I think Calgary is like unique because it's such a melting pot in that at that time when I was downtown that everyone was kind of the same mentality. So a lot of my like cooks would leave and go work at other places and move up and do that sort of thing as well. So one of my cooks at the time that I worked with at Milestones, he left and worked for Marietta's. I think he worked at the Parker House at the time when that was on 6th Ave there. Yep. And so that was part of their group. And he's like, hey, yeah, you got to talk to this guy. And Chris Grafton was like the corporate chef at the time and was kind of moving into a new role. And he's like, yeah. So I interviewed with him once and then kind of fell back and it was just like good conversation. Nothing really came of it, but like, let's talk in the future and kind of see if there's a right fit. Yep. He calls me up and offers me a job to like go be the chef at the one in Edmonton. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if like Edmonton's the place for me right now. And then fast forward 6 months later, I had a kind of crazy life change experience. I got in a car accident, after a dental surgery. Very fucked up and bizarre.
No way.
But I ended up like passing out behind the wheel, drove into 2 cars head on across like AE Cross, like at that like intersection there at Richmond Road.
Right by Richmond's Pump.
Yeah. And so that was in like 2012 or end of 2011.
Wow.
And for me, it was like cool. Like everything switched at that point. I'm like, cool. Like health's now like something to actually like be aware of, like, and like seeing all these things. And I actually went through this laundry list of tests and everything afterwards. So they didn't really know what was wrong or what happened or what caused it. Like, yeah, there's a dental surgery piece, but there's obviously some other stuff going on. So at that point I was like, hey, I just want a full clean slate. Let's change things. And so I called up Chris at Marietta's and I was like, hey, like I'd love to come on board in any capacity, like what's available. And I came on board as a sous chef for like their Stephen Ave location in the old Alberta Hotel there. And I ended up working for that group for like 3 years. So I moved up pretty quick and he really like groomed me to be successful in that of like learning new things and like almost getting rid of that corporate culture of just being like one way and be like more creative and being able to be really passionate about what you do, but also like treated people really well. Like he was a great leader to work for, of just like seeing a chef that's like so positive and like so people driven and that. And I had never really worked with someone in that realm before in like a private setting, whereas everyone else has been very intense that I've worked for or done stages at that time or anything like that. Whereas he was like, no, he's like, this is what it is. He's like very casual about how he talked about it, but when you're executing, you're executing. And so he kind of pushed me in all directions. I GM'd a restaurant for them at a time when Trib Steakhouse was around. I did that for a few months as like an intern piece.
Awesome.
But I learned tons of different things on both sides, from wine knowledge to everything. And so when I left there, I was like, oh, cool. Now I have this whole other like toolbox that I've built. But that was a really cool experience. And when I was there, we had, there's Marietta's in Canmore, Marietta's in Edmonton, which is no longer. We had the Parker House, moved into the Swine and Sow, and then had the Trib Steakhouse, and then the iconic like Marietta's in the Alberta Hotel. So
cool.
Really cool company to work for. And it's come full circle for me too. I can consult with them now and go back there. So yeah, it's a lot of interesting stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you like when you touched on it just for a second, you said how your dad kind of instilled some things about that inner drive.
Yeah.
What is it? And is that something that he like physically said to you, or is it just being around him that he always wanted you to like go?
My dad's very like direct, like super loving, like so caring, but like when like even like the way he does his own accounting or like looks after, like he's a banker, like that's his background. So very particular of like how things are and like numbers in order and this is how it goes. And I think for him it was kind of the direction of like wanting to be super happy with what I did, but also like usually people are happy when they're like progressing and moving forward. And I think that was for him like what it is. Like if I was like, hey, I don't want to do this, he's never like, no, you have to do that. Like that's part of like what it is. He'd be like, okay, cool. Like why don't you want to do it? And we'd have a conversation about it, and then we talk about like development and like roles. And I still call him to this day about absolutely everything in that world.
Just cool.
But like great advice, and always just like, no, like this, you just push the needle forward, and this is how you do it. And like, oh yeah, it might suck for this like 2 weeks, but like once you get past that, it'll be great. And like, or maybe you have to move this person out or help this, or like where how do you get to where you need to be? And so yeah, this was always that way, and always very direct of like, hey, like great advice, and just like very caring in his approach. And so for me, it was like always like, hey, cool, like how do I just kind of go that way?
So do you feel like you were not overachieve, but that inner drive? You know, when you said that about just looking for the next opportunity, or looking like not always like not being blind to what you have right in front of you, but you know, where can I get to? Where can I, like that internal push? Have you always had that?
I think so. I think especially like getting into this industry, and like that's always been kind of my direction of like how do I like move forward. And I think for a lot of chefs and a lot of people, it's creative people, it's like where do you kind of fill that cup, whether it's like operations or still being a chef, or like you just learn more on both sides. And so for me, I've really mixed my role up a lot, like with people I've worked for, and been in like an operations role, I've been in like a GM role, I've been in like a chef role. And so for me, I kind of like didn't really hit my like full like cooking stride, or like people really knew me for, until like the last few years, because that's really where I started to put out more food and more in that direction. But before, it's like, hey, like I just wanted to operate something really successful. And like how do you do that, whether it's being in the front or the back and using those skills from everything you learned in the past and being at those corporate places of seeing that, like how do you just make something successful? And that's really the biggest one for me, of like that drive for success and that drive for operating something that means something, and having people around you that like want to work for you and want to be there and like want to push that needle too. And that's really been my biggest driving point, I think.
It's cool, man. It's cool to hear, like, you know, not what makes a person tick, but like that inner drive, right? There's a reason people go out on their own and want to do their own thing, and it's that the good ones. There's just something in them that's moving them forward, which is cool.
Yeah.
So after Marietta's,
So when I moved to the city, my first roommate was getting into DJing at the time. DJ Heebs, like Bryn. So that was my first roommate in the city. We were like childhood great friends, like a brother to me. And then we also rode mountain bikes together. So there's just a lot of intertwining. But he's my first roommate in the city. Lived with him. Met a bunch of the guys from the Hi-Fi and all that when I first moved here. Yep. He was just starting to DJ like at the Den with like Graham first.
No way.
And Graham actually approached me. He's like, "Hey, do you want to do this? Like we've always joked about opening a restaurant just in like our time like at the club or doing something." And I was like, "Yeah, that sounds cool." And so introduced me to like PJ LaRue and John Leewag, and they were opening up Home and Away, and they're kind of just off there opening up craft and everything like that as well. And for them, they're like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And
so this is, it's all kind of, it's not random, but it's like you're in the right circle, right?
Yeah, it was so super organic. It was just like, "Hey, this is the concept. Is that something you're interested in?" And we talked about like other cities and like this like sports bar with really great food. And I was like, "Yeah, 100%. That sounds awesome. Like somewhere I can put my stamp on, do something unique." And so me, I was like, "Yeah, sign me up. Let's do it." And met all those guys, and we all just jived really well. And ended up, I've been working for that group off and on now for almost 6 years, which is crazy.
So Home and Away is the first one that's like your stamp.
Yeah,
you can like, this is my baby. This is like, And when they approached you with, obviously you said yes. Did you know right away that you could A, kill it, and B, did you know that what the menu was going to be? Did you already have it built out in your head? Or did you have to like work at it?
A little bit. I did a lot of like research and stuff too. I traveled a bunch before we actually opened the restaurant. I went to like Toronto, went down to the States, went to like Montreal, saw some more like bigger cities as far as what the direction is. Cause like there wasn't really like a cool sports bar in Calgary at the time, or like,
did you go around? Yeah. Did you go around to like all the bars around the venues? Like, when you're in Toronto, you go around like down by the Sky Dome, and then
checking
like,
all those out, and like seeing kind of like some chefs doing cool stuff. Where there was like a really small footprint place, like Home of the Brave way back when they had that as well. I was like, such a cool concept in Toronto, and just seeing like chefs do like really cool bar food, and I was like, okay, this is more of an approach that I didn't really necessarily see, but always like enjoyed. And when you would have that experience, and I think there's a few places in the city that did really great bar food before that too. And so for us, it's like, hey, how do we do that? And I think we aimed a little too high at the beginning and did stuff a little bit too obscure, and then we kind of scaled it into like, no, this is like what our food program is. This is where we're at, and it was learning. Like I think that was a cool experience with it. It's like you learn, you grow, you see something expand and do its own thing, and you get to a place where you know the clientele, you know like the team, you know the food program, you know the beverage program, and what works. And I think the best advice I got when I started kind of doing it is like once you realize you cook for a clientele and not yourself, you're so much happier. And I really got to that place when I was at Home and Away of like, hey, like I'm cooking for a clientele that this is what they love, and you evolve that love into things. So you're like, this sells really well. How do we do like another version of this or something that you know is going to work? And that was a really big learning piece for me.
So that's a shift, right?
Yeah,
because it kind of, I can imagine when you're coming up with like a menu concept, is it, this is what I think the world wants. Yeah. This is taking all my knowledge and I'm putting it out there.
Yeah,
which is important to me, right? I want like my passion to be shared with people.
Yeah,
but when you flip it to the other way, it's a different thought process, but a healthier one.
Yeah, I think it's like you talk about ego, and I don't think necessarily ego.
I was going to say, but I didn't want to say it.
No, I don't think ego is like necessarily a bad thing, but it's like you can only have so much of it. So like the more you can kill that ego and just be like, this is what's going, like you're going to be way more successful. But like people that have a little bit of an ego are also like they able to push like a really strong vision. So I think finding that balance where it's like people want to work with you and they understand and it's collaborative. That's a great ego to have. The other side of the picture, not so much.
For sure.
Yeah, getting there.
So Home and Away was your first taste of kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah, it was my first like executive chef at like a restaurant that was just me doing it. There was no one else around me as far as like a culinary director or like an executive chef above me doing it. It was like, no, this is your program. Like nail it out of the park. Like do what you like, pitch what you want to pitch, and then we'll say yes or no. So
what'd that feel like?
It was cool. It was
nervous or just
I got it. It was a little nervous. I think like when I remember doing the interview process for it and I cooked for everyone and they're like, yeah, that's a little more elevated than we want to go. But like, I'd rather like shoot up here and then like land somewhere here. And then it's like, you realize who you're cooking for and the clientele you're cooking for. And like that piece is where you want to land.
Yep. Yeah. And did you think you were comfortable being there because of that internal push? Like, do you think this, like drive to go and drive to the next. When you got to the next, you were like, oh,
yeah,
this is what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And I think, I never wanted to like drop off. I always want that progression happening. So I think when now I started to see this and like I was able to be really creative there. Like we did like a wing feature every week, a burger feature, a taco feature, and like became really known for like those wing features. And like,
I was going to say,
it's still a program to this day, like,
totally.
which I love to see. And actually the chef at Home and Away now was my sous chef at the very beginning. He was like one of the first hires, Jer, and he's awesome. And so just seeing someone progress as well underneath you, like that's what you want to see for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So your run at Home and Away goes for X amount of years, and then where's the path go?
So I was with Home and Away until kind of the transition to the new location on First. And at that point I went and actually worked for Craft. So I was with Craft Beer Market.
Because you knew John and PJ already.
Yeah. So came on to Craft, came as like a culinary consultant for them and worked out of the Alberta region, and started to do some food development with Craft. And I was there for till the pandemic basically.
Yep.
Went back to Home and Away, opened up Home and Away at the beginning, did the menu with them, brought Jer back and had that whole process, which was really cool to kind of see the evolution and be back for the next round. And
sorry, what do you think the change was from the different locations? Like when you went to the second location and opened that one, what was different in your thought process of what you're going to pull off with the menu?
I think as a whole, it was, we knew what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
So we're like, hey, this brand is awesome. We really like it.
Yeah.
These are the food pieces that really work. We really like it. Here's some other food pieces that I think will kind of push it over that is more approachable and people are going to come more often. So like pizza, having that pizza oven there is amazing and being able to do that. And then also just being like a bigger room, but it's tight and it feels good and it's like lower ceilings and like more spaces to kind of hang out and do different things and having like the shelf club underneath. Yeah, just offered a lot more. Whereas I was like, this is where the brand wanted to be all along, and so I think we got to a really, really cool place with it. Yeah,
cool. So you bring your buddy back.
Yeah,
he kind of like takes it over for you, and you just decide. Like, was that the plan all the time?
I was actually working for Craft when we opened it, so I went on board with Craft. This was like 7 months later that they opened Home and Away again. I came back, got the food program set up, and then I went back to my program with Craft.
And was Craft was obviously at a pretty big scale already. Yeah. So then all of a sudden you're kind of you're taking care of Alberta at a decent or how many restaurants are you actually?
Yeah, so Craft right now, so we're at the 2 locations in Calgary, 1 in Edmonton. So I was looking after those ones, and then I'd go help out in Kelowna as well for the summer. But Craft's a beast. It's a super cool program that is like done amazing things, and so being able to work for a group like that and seeing how much moving parts there is, like I don't think most restaurants in the country even operate at that level. So being there and being able to develop a food program, but also being like very cognizant of like how much prep takes into that, or like, hey, I might sell 1,000 of these in a week, like how do I like make sure this is executable and like go in that direction. But I loved it. It was awesome to work with them, like really, really great people and super passionate. Like everyone there is like in that driven state of like, how do we be really successful, especially in the leadership realm. And so getting to work in that, I loved. And for me, the creative side is always my like biggest passion in there. And I realized being there that was still my like biggest passion was being creative. And so I've been able to collaborate, do some more stuff. We just launched some really cool menus and some other projects that have come from it, and still work with all those guys now in different capacities, but still consult with Craft and work on some menu stuff with them as well. So
cool. Yeah. So after Home and Away 2.0 opens up, Craft, you're kind of done.
Yeah.
Then what?
So Craft, I stayed on until the pandemic. So we got all the locations back opened that crazy patio up on 10th. And then at that point I was like, hey, let's, for me, it was time to just do something different. And
just
cause I was in a point that I'm like, hey, I just want to really focus on my own brand and what I can do. And like, I felt like I could do more than what I was doing in just being in one restaurant, or not one restaurant, but like one kind of setting. And so for me, it was like I left and I literally just was like cooking on like Instagram and doing lots of weird stuff,
which is a thing. Yeah, but don't even, you can't even.
No, it's a thing for sure. But I was like, hey, like it's a pandemic. Like I'm like, what do you do? Like you're at home, like everything's closed, and so I started kind of rolling that when I was with Craft, and I was like, hey, like where do I want to go? Like what's the next step? And for me, I'm like, I always knew I wanted to own something and I wanted to put my mark on something, and like so it was just like a slow progression of that. And I'm like, hey, like I have all these tools that I'm like really great at. Why don't I just consult? And so I started consulting right away, basically. I went on with Rodney's and worked with them for like 6 months. They were like my first client. Cool. And kind of was like, hey, this is actually like a real thing. Like I can go in there, I can impact a business, I can work with some amazing people, and like what better to do that, like, and just grow that like umbrella of people that you work with and like grow those relationships. And for me, that's really where like everything kind of steamrolled from. I did that, started kind of in like the summer of don't even know how many years the pandemic's been
Well,
now.
so that would have been, it was like middle of March 19, right? It shut.
So I would have left like midsummer,
Yep.
and then kind of like just steamrolled from there and started doing stuff. And then fast forward into the fall, I ended up meeting with PJ, and me and him were like, hey, he's like, knew I was working on another burger concept. And so I was like, he's like, hey, why don't you just test it out at Craft? And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm like, maybe I'll name it. Maybe he's like, maybe you should just name it after yourself, or like maybe like what do you sound of this? So I was like, Burger Club, this thing. And so I'm like very like nervous about like naming something after myself.
I was going to ask you. So when you decide to leave Craft, and you're like, maybe I want whatever the creativity, just different experiences, more touch, whatever it is. Did you also realize that your personal brand was at a certain level?
Yeah. So like the year before Craft, I actually won Guys Grocery Games and did that.
Yeah.
That was a crazy, surreal experience, and like so fortunate to have been part of that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was like, okay, cool. Like I can like, it gave me that other boost of confidence. I think that I kind of needed, because I'm like, where do I land? Like I'm just like, I've kind of always been like, not in the background, but I was never really like forward pushing, and like and it's part of my brand.
It's not your name out front.
Yeah, and I think after that I was like, hey, like I can probably do this, and got a little bit more confident. And then fast forward a year and a half later, that's when like Burger Club kind of came into being, and like the conversation. I was like, do I name something after myself? And I'm like, yeah, it like works. Like it sounds good. Like so Pijot's Burger Club was born a month later after that, and we launched it in Calgary, and it was like this crazy success.
Run through what it was. So literally it was like middle of a pandemic, you're thinking of like what to do, and then it goes.
Yeah, so we really talk about it. I'm literally just gonna serve one burger with one sauce and have like a bunch of add-ons, and that's it. Like this is it. And they're like, okay, this is really simple. And then it just like took off, and I took kind of all those nostalgic pieces for me, and from like traveling the States and seeing those American burger joints that do cool things, and those pop-ups in LA and pop-ups in like New York that are doing great burgers. And for me, I'm like, hey, like let's hit it out of the park with this and do a really good program. And Calgary loved it, which was so cool. Loved it,
right?
Yeah, like,
I remember when Turbine put me onto like what you're up to, and so I followed the account, and all he would see is like, oh, we're sold out. Oh, we're sold out. Oh, we're sold out. Yeah. And it just kept on going. Like,
yeah, we were seeing huge numbers at like, I think like we're doing like 2,500 burgers in our first 3 days in Calgary. I was like, this is insane.
Crazy.
Like, not what we expected, but like very cool to see a success like that.
Yep.
But also like it's pandemic. Like we got to bring back every single person that worked at Craft, because we did it out of Craft as like a ghost kitchen.
Yep.
But like every single person came back to work, like, and like seeing this thing like grow, and people being super passionate about it, and like the team there like loving this like burger program that was like epic and super busy. So like I love that, and we saw that success. We're like, hey, can we replicate this and do it somewhere else? So we launched in Toronto. Had a great kind of initial push there, and
Ghost Kitchen out of
the Craft in Yonge and Adelaide.
Yep.
Blew up there as well and did really well. And then another month after that, we're like, let's do Vancouver and open up in the Craft in English Bay there, and seeing that on the beach, and like just the perfect setting for that. So just a really cool kind of journey with that. And then Burger Club is existing to this day, which we never really thought. We thought it'd be like a 3-month pop-up or a couple month pop-up, and when everything opened up, it would close back down. But still going.
Hammering.
Yeah.
What do you think it might be, well, you might know the answer, but why was it so successful? Besides the quality, check that box. The burger's amazing.
Yeah.
But like, what do you think it was?
I think it was the quality for sure. Obviously, that's like the number one thing. But I think it was just like a fun brand that was like playful and different, and there was like a kind of aura of people gravitating towards, because like so many people are just like, oh, this is really cool, we did it. But like I never expected like the pickup on it to be as crazy as it was, and I think that really drove the success of it. Like we announced it on January 1st 2019, and I think we were, by like the time we were in like February, we're at like 5,000 followers or 6,000 followers, and like we're at 12,000 followers by the time we opened up Vancouver. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like to see that like just push of like 4 months doing this, and like just like a dirty, delicious burger.
It's unbelievable. Like, I love burgers. Yeah.
And I think going into other cities was the collaboration piece for sure. And I think that's like the success I've seen the most in my career now, is like collaborating with really good people. So like when we opened in Toronto, we partnered with the Heartbreak Chef there, who has a crazy following, does amazing fried chicken out there in the city. He was actually on Guys Grocery Games with me and competed as well. And
you beat him.
And then in Vancouver, we partnered with Alex Chen, who's like one of the best chefs in Canada, and owns Boulevard there, and is the executive chef. And
so they're putting burgers onto your menu.
He did a burger for Burger Club in Vancouver as well. So we have like one chef driven burger in each concept outside of Calgary, and so
awesome.
Been cool to see that and collaborate with some great people, and see that success kind of steamroll from that collaboration piece as well. And I think that's where the success came in the other cities.
Do you feel like it takes some the collaboration piece is really important. It can also be a little intimidating too, right? To either to bring other people involved into your idea in case it gets taken over and like run away. But you're like, okay, this makes sense. These are good people.
I can honestly tell you, I've never had that thought.
You're just like, bring all the good people together.
Yeah, like let's do it. Like,
awesome.
And I think that's been a piece that just works. Like I've never really been on the burn end of that. Yep. So I think there is a possibility of it, knock on wood for sure. But I think if you're partnering with the right people and able to have those conversations and dialogue, then you're going to be in a really good position 99% of the time. And
which I agree. And I feel like the ones that don't think like that, they don't look at the world as an abundant opportunity.
Yeah.
They look at it as, I need to own all of this, that this is, which you can't own all of it. It just doesn't.
No.
And there's way more opportunities, which I think, that's why the collaboration piece makes a lot of sense, because
absolutely,
there's lots for everybody. So the Burger Club's rolling. Then where do you go?
So Burger Club's rolling.
Like rolling.
Yeah, it's going along, and at the time, I lose track of like how actually like the timeline all works. It's somewhere in there, but a good friend of mine, Aaron Allard, had the company that he started as well called Pasta La Mano, and they're making great pastas. And we're like, well, let's do a sauce and collaborate. And he's starting to push these like chef collaborations and working with other people too. And like for him, like instantly like gravitated towards like, let's go. This sounds awesome. And so we do a sauce, and same thing, picks up great, like sell it right away. I did like a red sauce from myself, and it was like based on like my Instagram cooking videos and like the whole thing, but it just worked. And we ended up partnering in the business together after that, and kind of growing that brand. And then fast forward like to the fall of last year, like a year after Burger Club kind of first initiated, and we were opening up I'm back a year behind now. So last fall, so 2020 fall, we launched Pasta Club. So this is probably like 3 months before Burger Club actually came into existence, but launched Pasta Club, same thing, subscription-based service, collaborate with a chef, get a pasta delivered to your house. And
it was only delivery.
Yeah, only delivery through Lamano, and saw that kind of skyrocket as well, and go that direction too. So lots of just collaborative pieces, but so yeah, partnering with Pasta Lamano for the last little while here, and we're just trying to grow that brand. We opened up in First Street Market recently, so we have our like hot kitchen in there, and then we also have a pasta shop on 15th Ave and 4th Street. So just cool to see that brand grow and people gravitate towards it, and the subscription service grow every month, and some awesome collaborations from Jesse at Mahdi Mahal to Alex Edmondson here in the city to a lot of other great chefs. So yeah.
How does it work? Like I haven't picked up on the Pasta Club idea.
So it's a subscription-based service monthly. You sign up online, gets delivered to your door. You can pick it up at the pasta shop. Which is new in the last 2 months. We've been able to pick up the pasta shop. But yeah, it's a composed dish from a chef that we've collaborated with. So they have a sauce, some garnishes, and then a pasta that we make with our team at Lamano as well. You get that, and then you get another one of our pastas that we produce. So that shows up. We see 4 meals essentially that come to your door. And but yeah, super fun collaborative effort there, and some really great people that we've worked with.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know that whole backstory. And then the other thing down at First Street.
A couple more things down at First Street. So
you answer.
Yeah, lots of things there. So First Street Market's been a fun kind of development that we've been working on for a while, but getting it open this year has been awesome. But partnered with Ryan, full circle from there, from Diner Deluxe, and
we should
those guys.
We should say something about Ryan right now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to invite him on the show again for the 16th time. You need to say yes, Ryan. Like,
yeah, Ryan, you got to do it.
Okay, thanks.
It's time.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, we started a brand called Friends with Benedict's, and that's been a super fun breakfast joint that does great bennies, great breakfast sandwiches. Breakfast sandwich, kind of a spin-off of Breakfast Club we launched after Burger Club, and so that's kind of the direction of kind of full circle collaboration between Diner Deluxe and myself, and creating that brand. And then we also have High Five, which is what Burger Club originally was going to be, but kind of burger, shakes, chicken, really kind of old school, nostalgic Americana. So we have two different versions of a cheeseburger, more kind of modern new school burger, and then our classic burger. A couple different sauces to choose from, a couple different cheeses to choose from, some great fried chicken, and some milkshakes and soft serve. So
that was the original idea.
Yeah.
So before the Burger Club started, that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
You wanted like a bricks and mortar ish place?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So that was the initial plan. So there's some similarities to it, still different, but some similar plays there. But
what put that idea on hold? Pandemic?
Timing?
You were just like...
No, we were doing it. It was literally the development. So we had the plan going for First Street for quite a while. So that was like 8 months out kind of thing at that point. what we thought was going to be 8 months out, which was almost a year out
Slow
at that point. Slow play, but now it's here. So
crazy.
Yeah.
So so right now, you're doing your own thing everywhere.
Yeah.
You're spread it. You're kind of got your hands in a bunch. It feels right. Like this is what all these years have led up to these moments, and it feels...
Yeah, the process right now feels pretty organic. It's like some really great collaborations. I have like a number of like consulting clients I work with, from different restaurant groups to places that are some silent partners kind of ships, and some that are more like public kind of partnerships, like stuff I do with craft.
Yep.
But been a really cool experience just to work with a ton of different people. But it's super hectic at times, but just feels organic, and it's worked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really cool to kind of be able to go into different cities and different markets and meet different people and see how different people operate. And it's the same thing. It's just continually building that that toolbox full of stuff, which is now it's very, very full circle.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a vision? Do you have like the next thing that you want to do?
Yes.
Do you want to say it out loud? If you don't want to, fine.
Yeah, I'm working on the project right now. That's like super exciting. I'm gonna open a restaurant, but that's like I think every chef wants to do.
No way, you're gonna do it.
I'm going to put a stamp on it. I'm not going to say much more than that.
Good for you, man.
It's coming soon. We're hoping to open in December. So
awesome.
We're going to announce in the next couple of weeks what's happening. So
good for you.
Stay tuned.
Well, it's good timing for this because it's really cool.
More elevated, kind of European dinette, but more of a vibe, and kind of that New York borough small concept meets like Montreal old city and that.
Cool.
So that's kind of the way we want to go about it. But I think it's gonna be a very cool, very unique space, super beautiful, and excited to introduce that shortly.
Awesome. The second question I was gonna ask you was like, do you feel in today's kind of in the food world, like, is it all coming back to small rooms again? Small, intimate, kind of vibey rooms versus like 5,000 square feet, 125 tops?
I'll be honest, in that world, I think like those big restaurants and big footprints are always going to have a place, and I think it's like a vibe that you cannot recreate, because it's like when those rooms are busy, it's like it's like insane, electrifying when you go in them. But you look at any big city, and like you see the success points of those big cities, they have so many small places and congested neighborhoods and that, and I'm like, that's one thing I'd love to see out of Calgary. And like, I think right now, with the way the pandemic's kind of forced people's hands as far as leases go and what downtown's happening and all those sort of things, it's now we're at a point of like, hey, like if you want to do something and you want to be creative, like this is the opportunity, like go after it. It's terrifying, but like if you can do it, make it happen. And I think the more we see that, you see it in like all these great little spots in Edmonton, Vancouver, and all the other kind of major cities in the country. They're all very small, very intimate, but it's like centralized in certain neighborhoods. And
so like pockets. And
so I'd love to see Calgary that way. Like you see that in like Victoria Park going in that direction. You see it on 17th Ave in certain areas off 17th, like Marda Loop, some of the suburbs. But it's all kind of coming around that way. Whereas I'm like, the more that direction happens and the more kind of congested you make these small places, it's going to feel really, really good. And it's inviting for people to come, and it's a big piece of our economy. And I think how the city's heartbeat just grows and grows and grows.
It's going that way, right? There's definitely more, born and raised here. There's definitely way more cool little pockets.
100%.
And so it just has to keep on happening. Within the kind of whatever the boundaries are of whatever you call inner city-ish.
Totally.
Like, does it work if it goes out further?
I think it does. I think like there's always that demand. Like, who doesn't want a rad restaurant or a rad little cocktail bar in their neighborhood? They walk down the road regardless of you're 30 minutes out of downtown and you're right here. And I think like that's just a natural thing of like what people want. Like they want to have that hospitality experience close by. And so like Mahogany's an interesting one too. Like seeing down there, and you have all these great places in like a very small footprint, but also it's so far away from downtown core. So I think it's natural. Do you
think these little pockets, do you think they work better with other restaurants and other food places very close? So you're making like a kind of a destination with multiple options, versus like a standalone in these cool neighborhoods.
I think it's like the option base, but it's like who doesn't want a great coffee shop? Who doesn't want a great like cocktail bar or like little like beer hall or something that's small in that footprint? Like a local pub is always what a neighborhood clicks off. If you go to Willow Park, you go anywhere, there's like these little neighborhood pockets all over the place. So I think it's just having a mix of everything that works, and like having that elevated thing. Like why doesn't someone want to go for a date night and they can just have to walk down the road, or like go in that place as well? So I think that's a big piece.
Do you think, and like you touched on, the opportunities right now coming out of a pandemic with either unfortunately businesses not being around anymore, or landlords changing leases, whether they're taking 2 bays and flipping into one bay and putting them into 2, so there's now 2 business. Are you seeing more opportunities now?
I think so. Like the amount, like I just look at like my email from like leasing agents on like a regular basis, and it's nonstop. I'll probably get 5 to 6 a week, whether it's in this city or other cities. But it's like people are out there. There's opportunity. So it's like the more we can kind of hone into like doing more cool stuff in Calgary and downtown. I think that's where you see it happen.
Are you focused on Calgary? Like this is
home based for sure. I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah.
But I obviously like the expansion thing, and I think with like some of the more unique brands that we're doing and like the quick service concepts, like that's where you can really see that growth happen outside of the city and outside of that footprint. And I love seeing those brands become larger than life and stuff from Calgary being growing up and going there. You look at OJ's, you look at Kraft, you look at Moxie's, like all of them have expanded out of Calgary, and seeing that as like this is the place where it started, and like seeing that, I think there's so much opportunity here for that.
Do you think the little, like High Five or Friends with Benedict's, like are those easier to scale in more cities, or are those trickier because of the?
I think it's the finding the right location, the delivery app piece, all those now it's like kind of full circle. So it's like maybe you don't need to be right in like the central spot, but then you have like all these delivery platforms that you can now operate off of, and it's just finding the perfect balance and mix of those. But those sort of concepts and brands can kind of work anywhere. I feel like
could you do you think like could you pop up a Friends with Benedict somewhere else?
Yeah, I think it's scalable. I think that'd be like a goal and dream for I think all of us involved of seeing that kind of be successful in other markets as well.
Kelowna, Victoria, just kind of follow the other one. Just kind of
they're super fun and approachable, and I think that's like where it is. It's a good price point, and having that kind of all those pieces click off the box. I think that's where you see it work.
Did you when you look back to where you are right now? When you were leaving Moxie's, or did you know? Could you have forecasted or had a vision where you are right now?
0%.
Like
0%.
Back then, was it a traditional goal of, okay, maybe I want to open up a restaurant?
Yeah.
I want the bricks and mortar place.
Yeah. I think that's the goal of every chef, especially when you're younger. You're like, hey, I want to own my own place and be able to do my own thing and have my own food. And for me now, it's like my vision is like, how can I collaborate with more people and do more stuff in more places? And that's really where my like brain's at now. But also, I think there's a natural piece of like, hey, how can I like work really hard, but also have that balance of like fun and like away time from work too. So it's a finicky, very strange, hard balance to find. But honestly, I think it's coming along.
The honesty.
Yeah.
But now that you're here, it's like it's very clear of
100%
of what you're supposed to do and what drives you.
Yeah.
Super cool, man. There's only one question I ask the guests, and it's the way that we put a bow on the show. And so when I say Calgary, where does your head go?
Collaborative.
It makes sense.
Like I don't think this city works if you're not collaborating with people and having those conversations, and there's so many different walks of life in this city, and it's a beautiful place to be. And I think just having that continued conversation, and who doesn't want to have a good time and see their city grow and be in a better spot for everyone involved, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're running a big corporation or you're going to school or you're just retiring, like where do you land? And I think Calgary has that kind of all to offer, which is a beautiful place to be.
I agree, man. Do you think that, going into different conversations, do you go in open-minded, just wanting to meet people and then just being able to, there's an opportunity there? Like, do you just do you, and they just kind of organically start coming towards you?
I think so. I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty like open and just out there. So like for me, I'm like, I love to just chat with people and love to hear people's excitement about what's going on. And over the last year of being more kind of like public in what I've been doing, like a lot of people just come up to me and like want to talk. And I've met some really cool people that way. And I think that's just an interesting, like beautiful part of the city. Like you don't have that anywhere else. Like I'll walk down 17th Avenue and they'll be like, burger guy, like yelling at me. And it's so weird and awkward, but also I'm like, it's like flattering and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
So
once you get over those first initial, like, this is like, But you've built a personal brand, right? That can spin off into anything you do.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for the city for helping me do that.
Super cool, man. Yeah. I know you're a busy dude, so thanks for making the time for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, really cool to get to know you. So
you too.
I can't wait to keep track of this new venture that you got going on.
Yeah, please do. Coming out very soon.
Awesome. Okay, man, I'll talk soon.
Yeah, take care.